t-shirt in Florida last March at a flea market. I think it says a lot. Anyways, let's turn off the music right about there. Anyways, welcome back to the reading of ABAJAM Chronicles, books 1 and 2. Before we go any further, A, make sure you like this video. Now, that's assuming you liked it, of course. No pretense on my part. And B, subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed. And make sure you hit that bell so you'll be notified when I post another video. And C, as of tomorrow, yay! We're on holidays, so I can't guarantee you a video for next weekend. But yeah, my bad. But my job at Hollywood North Studios this week worked the poop out of me. I'm still not recovering from my grueling 15-hour day a few days ago. Hey, it takes this old man 2 to 3 days to recover, and it's just one of the joys of getting old. Anyways, and I just cut my grass, the lawn, that is. And so before we leave, I want to make sure that, if we're gone for a few weeks, it doesn't get too high. And of course, I've been loading up my truck and mounting the bike hitch. We take that off when we pick up our trailer and put our bikes on our trailer. We have a special platform for that. And I'm now stopping long enough to enjoy a really good beer, Downtown Brown. It's an Amsterdam beer. And create this video for you. Excuse me. Oh, that's so good. Now, I have some more good news for all of you, and especially those who were anxious for the release of my second book. I just got it back from my editor, who's had it for a whole month editing it. Okay, it required a lot of work. Now, the real work begins for me. That's the rewriting of my book, correcting all the spelling, punctuation, grammatical errors, as well as some of the content conflicts. She even mentioned something about some things that might be construed as politically incorrect. Yeah, right, as if I believe in that stuff. But anyways, but I still have to work on it, and I'll still have to. But that's what I'm going to be doing. 2 weeks on vacation. I'll be on the beach. We'll be barbecuing. We'll be cycling. We're going to Grand Bend, the Pinery. So, you can search for me, but you'll never find me. Anyways, but that's why, by the way, that's one of the reasons you hire an editor. For anyone out there who ever has aspirations of writing a book, you need to hire an editor, a good editor. And if somebody says, I can do it for you for free, you're going to get what you pay for. Okay, I found that out the hard way with book number 1. I had a friend of mine do the proofreading, a qualified person who said he would do it for free as a family friend. And I ended up having to republish it again because there were like 4 pages of mistakes in it, found by another friend of mine, and I found the page myself. So make sure you hire a good editor, a good proofreader, and you get what you pay for. But anyways, and this is what now my editor said about, she sent me a letter and she sent me the work that she'd done. This is what she said about ABAJAM Chronicles, a strange new world, same old world. Okay. Hi there, Alfie. I hope this note finds you enjoying the beautiful summer to its fullest, which I am. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed your thoroughly imaginative, ambitious book. What an impressive feat this is. You should be very proud. Anyways, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this edit. I feel invested in this project now. And that really makes me happy because she's actually anxious to get on and participate with me in getting this book done. And my artist is Elise. I'm not going to give you her last name yet. She is a friend of mine on Facebook, so if you befriend me on Facebook, you'll find out who she is. Anyway, she's done some really excellent work on the pictures, for my book. So illustrations, I should say. So it's all good. Now, let's get ready to read. Oh, by the way, you'll notice there are 2 bookmarks in here. If I feel ambitious, I just might read an extra chapter. What do you think of that? So, before we begin, Chapter 9, Invasion of the Body, Brain Snatchers Revisited. A little play on words there. we have to go back to last week, where we left off, the last paragraph. I turned on the radio and found Timmins Q92. When the announcer reported the time to be 7:15 in the morning, I was totally flabbergasted to discover all our watches and truck clocks were right on time. As it turned out, we did get a reasonably good night's sleep. Either that or Q92 was running on a different time zone, like the Pacific time zone, for instance. So now we begin Chapter 9, Invasion of the Body-Brain Snatchers Revisited. I suspected I was going to have a hard time trying to explain my decision to the boys. For some inexplicable reason, I had come to the conclusion, somewhere between Timmins and before we had reached Cochrane, my last delivery stop, that it might be wise not to reveal our incredible experience of my personal encounter with a live alien to anyone, especially not to the media, at least not just yet. In all honesty, I just couldn't let the boys know why. I had no intention of recounting any of the details, let alone discussing yesterday's, or was it today's, events. I'm still uncertain what to make of that whole time gap phenomena we had experienced and who I could disclose it to. Definitely not to anyone who might be an established authority on UFO phenomena. I had come to the conclusion that any and all final decisions concerning the welfare of the two modules would be wholly my responsibility. Mine alone. After all, wasn't it me who had risked his life venturing into the wreckage of that spaceship? And it was me who salvaged the modules before the spaceship self-destructed. I must always bear that in mind. And in italics, the modules are to remain in my sole possession. I heard myself direct myself, somewhere from within my subconscious. As for my reasoning, it seemed sound enough, at least as far as I was concerned, perhaps even justifiable, in light of past and present circumstances. As the day progressed, I became even more convinced in my mind of my decision. Whenever Jason or Stevie broached the issue, which they did repeatedly during the entire course of our journey, always objecting to my decision, although timidly, I'd curtly dismiss their objections with a simple, "You're too young to understand. I'm making an adult decision here." I felt no obligation to provide an explanation to them other than by fiat of my adult authority. Eventually, as it is typical with most young people, finding myself unable to dissuade them, I'd have to resort to using subtle forms of coercion. I would make references to past examples of people who publicly admitted to having witnessed or encountered or being abducted by aliens, and the consequences of these people suffering these people suffered afterwards. It was as if I were being directed by an unfamiliar source, like another person had occupied my mind and was now dictating to me the interrogatives of grammar, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how, to all of my responses. Again in italics. Relate to them what will happen to you and the boys should the media get hold of your story. How you'll all be scorned by society, lose your job, be mocked by your peers and ridiculed, even shunned by your family. Happens all the time, I argued to them as well as myself. At one point, while we were sitting in the Husky restaurant in Cochrane, waiting for my reload information, I stared both of them squarely in the eyes, looked my doleful best, and asked them in earnest if either of them were willing to have me put away in some mental asylum, all for the sake of retelling the world we saw a UFO. I even suggested we might be taken away to some secret government facility in order to keep this encounter secret so as not to panic the public. Where have we heard that story before, right? After some significant browbeating, both boys were so thoroughly discouraged that they relented, vowing to never discuss their or my experience to anyone other than ourselves. I had completely crushed their elation from having witnessed something spectacular to feeling they were witnesses to a gangland killing and were now the potential targets of a mob reprisal. But it wasn't long before it was my turn to be bullied. The assault or battle for my mind began shortly after leaving Cochrane and heading towards the paper mills of Rouen-Noranda in Quebec. We were to pick up a load of newspaper rolls for the Sudbury Star and a Mississauga weekly. My mind began to reel from some form of schizophrenic raging. It was like witnessing psychological warfare firsthand, up front, and just a bit too damn personal. Right before my eyes, so to speak, I was actually participating in and helping to develop this dichotomous and split personality. There was this intense argument, a debate in my own consciousness, or was it my subconscious, hotly vying for supremacy. In italics again. Show them the modules for proof and you'll be accused of being insane, I railed at myself, especially with your brief but recent history of mental illness. Don't you use that against me, I defended. But to whom? But it just didn't stop there. Accusations followed argument. Again in italics. You'll be incriminated for concocting an elaborate hoax and using the boys as your patsies. You'll be reviled, despised as an evil person, just like a Fagin. Children's Aid will automatically step in and separate you from Jason and your youngest daughter Allison by declaring you an unfit father. Others will say you were scheming to sell those phony alien artifacts on the open market, thereby defrauding some poor but naive interested third party. You might even end up in jail. So what if the accusations are false? You'll still lose your good job, that's for sure. What would Bernie think of you? And how about Andrea and her future plans to go to university? Now this is all happening in my mind, this raging warfare. Again in italics. They'll take those modules away from you and give them to some lame, inept bureaucrat who, in turn, will hand them over to some half-rate government-run and probably poorly funded scientific agency to conduct all manner of unnatural tests on them. Even as I struggled with this tumult churning in my mind, I could sense a fear in my alter ego as it pleaded, reasoned, tried to cajole me not to relinquish them. Again in italics. They'll probably hurt, maybe even destroy them. Remember the conditions of all those poor blackened modules you saw inside the spacecraft? You can also be sure you'll never see these again, either. At that moment, I actually felt a sense of remorse swell up within me at the thought of all those poor deadened modules. It actually got to the point where the reasons for not divulging the existence of the modules, or what had transpired last night, was beginning to crowd out every other thought in my head. My brain was throbbing with such a massive migraine that it was now affecting my driving. No pain medications I had on board the truck could possibly relieve my discomfort. Only out of utter desperation, induced by almost intolerable waves of pain, was I finally able to focus my thoughts. Through sheer force of will, I was able to exert a serious mental restraint and regain so much of my presence of mind. I had stopped my mind from running amok with every conceivable reason, argument, or excuse for holding on to the modules. In the end, I no longer felt the need to keep the information about the spaceship a complete secret. I can unequivocally say I won out, at least for the time being, but not before totally freaking out the boys, bedeviling them with my altered schizoid self. Apparently, I had actually carried on some intense and quite vocal arguing with myself during the trip to Rouen, Quebec. For what it's worth, I can honestly say that little existential episode had never happened to me before. Unfortunately, I doubt either of the boys would have believed me. I was having a hard time believing myself at the moment. In order to alleviate some of the boys' newfound anxiety and heightened uncertainty about me, I'd be uncertain about myself as well, I had to come to a difficult compromise, at least for me and my other self. I assured them I'd consent to their letting our immediate family, Stevie's parents, my wife, and oldest daughter, etc., in on our most excellent secret. After that, when the opportunity presented itself, and if the timing was right, we could all sit down together and discuss exactly what should be done with the modules. By allaying some of their misgivings about me and my intentions concerning the modules, I had prevailed in establishing some peace of mind for myself, however temporary that may prove to be. The boys acceded, agreeing at my insistence, of course, that all future discussions concerning the modules and any disclosure of the alien spaceship would have to be unanimous. As for me and my shadow, it was a temporary reprieve, a welcome deferral to stop the boys from pursuing this nagging issue any further. Or so I hoped. Now and then, during our drive back down south after having picked up my load of paper, I'd casually glance back into the bunk to ensure that the modules weren't being mishandled or hurt. Jason and Stevie were constantly handling and examining them. No sooner will I look back to the road than I'd have to shake my head in disbelief. What the hell was I thinking? I was exhibiting more concern for the well-being of the modules than for the boys, my own son for that matter. So exactly what the hell was happening to me? I demanded. By this time, no answer was forthcoming, just a lot of unanswered questions. Who knows what strange side effects all that exposure to the alien slime and those two objects were having on us, I pondered. We really should get ourselves checked out at a clinic just to be on the safe side. What do I say to my doctor? Doc, I got slimed by an egg alien. Mark is real. Got an antidote? That's when she and her husband produced the straitjacket. But I didn't get probed, honest. Still, I couldn't overcome my empathy and feeling of affinity for those things in the back. I soon found myself experiencing a strong sense of serenity that regardless of the effects we were experiencing at present, they were all but harmless and I needn't worry about it. One unnerving thought did manage to break through. Was I being guided, manipulated by some alien subliminal messaging? Was I somehow possessed? Obviously, the answer I got was no. Before too long, while both boys were preoccupied in the back, another completely opposite battle of intent began to rage in my mind. Why shouldn't we share our discovery with the world? It might benefit mankind, even maybe make me rich and famous in the process. I soon felt that same intense headache, the one I had previously conquered, recurring, only this time it occupied the other side of my brain. Off and on, my mind would succumb to all manner of abstract, muddled, and paradoxical thoughts. This was getting more confusing by the mile. Eventually, persuasive arguments, both for and against surrendering the modules, poured forth like an open flooded drain into my poor embattled brain. Sometimes the reasons regarding either argument were vague and so abstract as to be incomprehensible. The next moment, both arguments became completely rational, coherent, and irrefutable. My thinking process was at an impasse. Surely the very notion that I or my thoughts were somehow being manipulated by these innate objects was totally absurd, if not downright ridiculous, I contended. But my conscious mind, or what was left of it, was being driven into a state of unprecedented turmoil. All the aliens are dead, I kept reminding myself. Those things in the back have no power source to speak of. Look, they're dormant, not a flicker of colored light. No sparkles or stinky gas either. Dead, dormant. Hell, to the uninitiated, they look just like two harmless, opaque acrylic toilet seat lids. The kind my wife might buy at a flea market, I reiterated. They gotta be harmless. None of us have gotten sick. We haven't broken out in some weird purple rash. Yep, still got 2 arms. Before I could complete the sentence in my mind, a panorama of images from E.T., Star Wars, scenes of episodes from Star Trek, and images from science fiction novels I'd read, all simultaneously paraded through my mind. The only way to describe it was like viewing a multi-layered, multimedia presentation of all my favorite science fiction through a kaleidoscope. The imagery was so vivid and overwhelming, it literally stifled all my other thoughts, almost like seeing your whole life flash before you just before you die. What a marketing tool for Gene Roddenberry. Whoa! I half silently commanded my runaway thoughts. I shook my head one more time, trying to shrug off the clamor as well as the pain in my brain and regain some iota of my normal self back again. Damn it, I'm supposed to be in charge here, I shouted out loud, startling the boys in the back. Sure, Dad, Jason stammered nervously. Never mind, boys, never mind, just thinking out loud. That little outburst wasn't directed at you guys. I'm just getting a bit of a headache. I had to laugh at myself for allowing so much absurd and silly conflict to play out in my mind. Still, it was almost disconcerting, and I'll admit my laugh did carry a nervous twinge. Whatever was happening to me, I decided best to keep it to myself for now. The two boys were too young to understand. Even I didn't quite understand. I don't think anybody will. After that earlier outburst, I made every effort to suppress the other voice, along with any other thoughts that might try to gain ascendancy in my mind, or the pleasure of driving me crazy. At least not today, not while the boys are with me. Besides, I still had a delivery to make tomorrow in Sudbury. Anyways, that's the end of chapter 9. Now, maybe we'll venture into chapter number 10. But before we do that, beer time. Okay. I play the outro and then the intro again, but why bother? That's the postcard. Okay. Chapter 10. There's no really sense reading the last paragraph of the last chapter because we just read it. So chapter 10. For those of you who remember the series, okay, with Robin Williams, first I meet Mork, then Mindy. The Sudbury Star is an oddly designed white brick two-story building with gray trim and red brick on the sides. The front of the building curved outward with its rows of windows facing Mackenzie Street. It wasn't at all difficult to find. Once I had the appropriate number of rolls of paper removed from my trailer, I pulled away from the docks, parked my rig well away from the receiving docks so as not to obstruct other deliveries, and wandered off inside the building. Excuse me. It's one of the things when you have a mustache, little hairs come up and itch your nose. It had occurred to me just before arriving in Sudbury that there must have been some kind of news report on the events of Monday night. As there were no two-day-old newspapers laying about the dock, I decided to make a personal inquiry. Anyways, before leaving the truck, I gave both boys explicit instructions they were not to venture from the cab, nor were they to disturb the modules, now safely tucked away. Oh, that's right. I should have changed my hat for this next reading. Oh well, bear with me. While at the paper mill in Rouen, I had found some excellent sheets of thick Bristol board used to separate the large rolls of paper. I utilized a couple of these sheets, carefully wrapped up our special prizes. I secured the wrapping with a good measure of commonly used white clear adhesive tape. I then stored both packages, under the bunk in the side box. No one was permitted to handle them anymore, not until my say-so, not even me. The Star's switchboard was located on the main floor, just inside the front entrance. Behind the large desk sat a somewhat flustered young woman, trying to field the numerous calls flashing across the enormous phone console. Several of the buttons were flashing, indicating these callers were on hold. Obviously, the woman behind the counter had her hands full with her present duties and wouldn't want to engage me in a conversation that was longer than necessary. This suited me just fine. I wondered to myself if the offices and rows of desks behind and above her, half a flight upstairs, was where I'd have to go. Pardon me, where can I find a newsroom? Two more lines began to ring simultaneously. They're on the second floor, I think, replied the receptionist, a little disconcertedly. She was a brunette of about 20-ish, who looked to be out of her element. I'm just a temp, and this is my second day on these phones. Is there anyone in particular you wish to speak to? Oh, excuse me for 1 minute. She turned away in a bit of a dither to respond rather brusquely, I thought, to several incoming calls, as several more lines were about to come off hold. I casually smiled in her direction, waved both hands, and whispered it wasn't important. Thanks anyway. She barely had time to flash me a short smile and nod in return before her attention was demanded again by the busy console. I glanced around for an elevator. There was none. I noticed people making their way over to a large set of stairs on my right. Must be the way, I concluded. Ascending to the second floor, I entered into a hive of activity. People were briskly walking to and fro, others were seated at desks answering ringing phones, while some others were engaged in conversation with possible co-workers. I wasn't at all certain who I should approach. I didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to myself by asking the wrong questions, in case more was known about the incident than I presumed. Almost everyone I tried to engage was too busy, occupied with someone, or disinterested in my rather I have a hard time, enigmatic inquiries. Sorry about that. Some words I do have a problem with. Not that I could blame them. I didn't want to be too specific. On the other hand, I wasn't too impressed with the two reporters who ignored me by insisting that's not my department and I don't work in that region. I was actually thinking about foregoing my inquiry when I turned and almost collided with a stunningly gorgeous woman. She had large dark eyes that sparkled when she smiled, which she readily did as I clumsily apologized for almost knocking her over. I felt rather awkward being in such close proximity to someone so young and attractive. I had to be 10 years her senior. Please, you don't have to apologize, she replied with genuine good-natured demeanor. She lightly brushed her long and lustrous auburn brown hair from her finely featured face with her left hand. I couldn't help but notice she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Her right hand and forearm were pressing a small stack of folders and rolled up charts against her full and ample breasts. I could faintly distinguish the outline of a black lace bra under her sheer silver rayon blouse, provocatively unbuttoned just above the bra's strap. This was the most cleavage I'd seen in ages. Bernie was nowhere near as well endowed. Pity, I sighed. I work here, she continued, so I'm the one who should be more observant where I'm walking. You, on the other hand, look as lost as a stray puppy, and I'm very good at helping stray puppies. As she said that, a big smile formed on her exquisite mouth, and I almost melted on the spot. I was oblivious to everything happening around me except for her. She was definitely happening in my mind, and elsewhere. It was then that one of her rolled-up charts slipped from under her arm. I quickly bent down in an act of chivalry to pick it up. That's when I discovered she was wearing one of the shortest skirts I had had pleasure to see in a good long while, with a pair of beautiful legs to match. There was a tantalizing slip up the left side of the skirt, revealing just enough thigh to banish all other relevant thoughts from my mind. Even modules. So there. Thoughts about probing came into mind again. Thank you. You're a real gentleman. So how can I be of assistance to you? I stammered. Fumbling for my thoughts. For a brief spell, I had completely forgotten why I was there. For the life of me, I can't remember, I confessed awkwardly. I was flushed with embarrassment, and I don't doubt for a moment she knew why I was at a loss for words. Why don't you walk with me to my office? Perhaps the short walk will refresh your memory. I'll even let you carry that roll for me. I had to make a conscious effort not to stare too hard in the direction of her swaying hips whenever the aisle got narrow and I was forced to walk behind her. My deliberate attempt to avoid staring probably made me all the more conspicuous. What do you do around here, if you don't mind me asking? Judging by the way she was dressed and carried herself, I assumed she was some executive's Girl Friday. Go for a coffee, go for files and charts, and looks knocked down dead gorgeous, coming and going. Anyone who looks that good probably couldn't type more than 25 words a minute. I'm just one of the editors. I usually work in the lifestyle section. We're short-staffed today, so I'm helping out with the weather and meteorological section, she candidly replied. Wow, you're an editor? I asked her incredulously, feeling somewhat embarrassed. Boy, I thought to myself, so much for assumptions and first impressions. She looked down her nose at me with an expression of being mildly piqued, or piqued, and asked, "You don't think I could be an editor?" To be absolutely truthful, I replied, I don't think you should be. Now her large dark eyes widened with a startled expression. She had not anticipated that answer and was slightly taken aback. I never liked being put on the defensive. Excuse me. Quite frankly, I continued, I've always envisioned newspaper editors to be old, fat, and balding, usually chomping on a cheap cigar and wearing bad ties. And as for women editors, they should look like Katharine Hepburn, definitely not as attractive as you. Now it was her turn to be a little flushed with embarrassment. The subtle blushing of her full cheeks, slightly wrinkled by her upturned smile, could only enhance an otherwise flawless complexion. Thank you. That was very flattering, she said. I really am in the presence of a genuine gentleman, and I don't even know your name. I'm Albert Meisner, but all of my friends call me Al, I stated, trying to be charming and not appearing too brazen. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Al. You can call me Mindy, she added, half turning to shake my hand with what I interpreted as an affectionate squeeze. We walked on a little further. She then stepped into a large, well-lit rectangular room adorned with only several steel-framed plastic chairs, all but one neatly tucked under a cluttered, long, rectangular folding table. I followed in step close behind her. Once inside her office, I promptly removed my fedora in proper etiquette. That's how a gentleman does it. Ever the true gentleman, she exclaimed, appreciating my sense of decorum. Then in the same breath she lamented, I don't see that too often from men any more. She then closed the large wooden doors behind her. My heart skipped a beat. The table was of common maple-colored variety you often see in church basements and at picnic functions. Scattered across the table's top were loose sheets of paper and photographs, some notepads, a couple of maps, and some more, what I presume to be, rolled-up weather charts. This is not my office, she apologized, but it's where I'm doing much of my work today. So, Al, did the walk jar your memory at all? It had done more than that, but at the moment, I had to focus on the business at hand. Okay. It had occurred to me that if she were actually an editor, she of all people might know about any reports or unusual incidents that had transpired in the night sky on Monday. I didn't like being disingenuous with her, but I had to come up with some plausible and reasonable excuse for wanting particular information about that night. I pretended Jason was an amateur astronomer who had come on a northern run with me, using it as a summer field trip. He was hoping to see the northern lights. I hastily concocted the story that my son, while attempting to observe the northern lights earlier this week, through my field binoculars, from a vantage point near Timmins, thought he witnessed a falling star or meteor. He described it to me like an intense bright light burning briefly across the horizon and then falling out of sight. It was late Monday night when he supposedly saw the thing. I can't recall exactly when. I've been preoccupied with other things on my mind of late. That at least was truthful. Besides, he was the one doing all the observing. He was hoping there may have been other reports of similar sightings to confirm his. I doubt if your son saw anything of significance on Monday night. If I recall, that area around Timmins was thoroughly overcast throughout much of Monday night, unless, of course, where you were, there was a brief break in the clouds. She paused for a moment, rifling through some satellite photographs. She quickly found what she was looking for, examined it briefly, then continued, but I doubt it. She held it up and extended a grainy 8 by 10 faxed photograph to me. We get these from the Canadian press. We don't really have our own weather department. Now, as you can see, that was quite a dense mass of cloud cover that night, more than likely an unusual display of lightning, or perhaps a low-flying airplane flying through the clouds. Timmins does, after all, have a small airport. I have to concur with your findings, I acknowledged, and then lied about how my son would be disappointed with this information. He had hoped his sightings would be corroborated by a credible source, such as your weather department. That's a shame, she sadly exclaimed. So how old is your son? You should have brought him upstairs with you. She had caught me completely off guard by her question. Last thing I wanted was Jason up here. He's about as interested in astronomy as he is in girls right now. She's probably forgotten more astronomical and meteorological stuff than the two of us combined currently know. One wrong question, and she'd immediately see through my ruse if he were with me. He's 13, I nervously stammered. Right now, he and his best friend are waiting in my truck. I didn't think it appropriate to have them tag along without permission first. I absolved myself by adding, perhaps another time. I'd like that. Where exactly did you say this object disappeared? You said you were in the Timmins area? I originally came from Timmins. It's my hometown. To honestly answer your question, just north of Timmins, I said, I think he said, near some lake called Kennegamissee. Do you know it? Do I know it? My parents have a camp on the lake. You say your son saw it falling bright light on Monday night? What a coincidence. My mother called me on Tuesday and told me a boat or a float plane might have possibly blown up in the middle of the lake. It woke up everybody in the camp. Maybe that's what your son saw, especially if it was a float plane that was on fire and crashed into the lake. But I haven't heard any news to that effect to corroborate my mother's story. When I get back to the truck, I'll ask him if it was possible he could have mistaken seeing a burning plane for a meteor. If that's the case, he won't be so disappointed. I don't imagine you know how exciting 13-year-old boys would find that kind of information. Oh, don't be too hasty to convince him it was a plane. Nothing has been reported so far about any missing planes, let alone one crashing in that area. So we don't even know if anyone was injured. My mother tells me they don't even know whose plane or boat that might have been that blew up and sank. For all concerned, including your son, it still remains an unsolved mystery. I sincerely thanked Mindy for her time. Grasping her right hand with both of mine, I was about to give her a fond handshake of appreciation when she placed her free hand on my hands and applied an affectionate, gentle squeeze. We both gazed deeply into each other's eyes. Emotions stirred within me that I hadn't felt for a long time. Emotions that a married man shouldn't feel. I hope to see you again in the near future, she added after releasing her grip. As a matter of fact, let me give you my business card. I'll just write my home phone number on the back. The front has the star's number and my extension in case you can't reach me at home. To make the offer of the card and her personal phone number appear innocent and benign, she suggested, you may wish to give me a call in the next few days to see whether anything's developed concerning your son concerning what your son might have actually seen. Yeah, that's kind of an exciting chapter. I smiled demurely and stuffed the card into my top shirt pocket. Oh, she blurted, raising her left hand with index fingers pointing up. Two things I almost forgot to mention. August isn't the best time to view the northern lights. It's much more spectacular in late fall and during the winter months. And their scientific name is the aurora borealis. But your son probably already knows that. I knew it as well, but I wasn't about to reveal that to her. Better that she think of me as a good but uninformed father. I donned and tipped my fedora, thanking her one last time, turned about, and graciously made my exit. It occurred to me as I made my way to the stairs that 3 days ago I had met Mork, the alien in the eggshell, and today I had met Mindy. I had to laugh to myself. It amused me to think what Bernie would say if I mentioned today's little flirtatious episode to her. For the time being, I thought it best to keep this episode secret to myself. Just one more secret to underscore a week full of duplicity. My take on today was like that verse in a song by Paul Sermon. Who am I to blow against the wind? I patted my pocket containing Mindy's card and snugly smiled to myself. No harm in imagining. The only question I have on my mind now is, so where's Exeter? And so ends the reading of chapter 10. Next time I read to all of you, I'll try to make an effort at the camp. I've got my camera rig set up. I'm taking my tripod and my mini tripod. So maybe I'll be able to do something. Wi-Fi's kind of sketchy, but next reading will be chapter 11. Boys must be boys. Anyways, you know, it occurred to me that I never did reset my camera before starting this read. My apologies. Anyways, I got a lot of packing to do. We have things to do to go camping. And until next time I see all of you, you have yourself a good weekend and a good week. And thanks again for visiting me. ABAJAM Chronicles, reading of 2 books.